Hello everyone, this is Jotto and welcome to my second Top 5s BRM edition video. So this will be the top 5 overhyped cards coming out of BRM, and overhyped being that they didn't do as well as they were hyped up to be. Keep in mind that that does not mean that the cards on this list are either good or bad, it's just how they did compared to their hype. Now, I will admit, this list was surprisingly hard to make. Not because I had to whittle down the list like I have in previous editions, but because getting 5 cards was very difficult, to the point when it just didn't really work. So what I've done instead is that normally I rate cards based on how they individually do based on their hype. But in this case, it's how much they affected the class they're in based on their hype, or how they kind of failed to deliver on the role they were expected in. You'll see what I mean when I get into it, but let's just say this is a bit of a weird list compared to my previous overhyped and underhyped videos that I've made. Now, before we get started, I actually have an announcement to make, which is that I'm going to be starting to run tournaments again. As some of you may know, some of my viewers that have been around for, it's been a year and a half at this point, I did used to run a lot of tournaments, and recently I ran a qualifier for the Mormy Invitational, which did go through, I think, about a week ago. So I did run one of the qualifiers for that, and it got me thinking that I could probably start up something on Fridays again. It would be done with probably with the more Hearthstone group to help me out a bit, and obviously some of my teammates who are interested in running tournaments, so they'd be helping me out. But the idea is that I'd be running them on Fridays, because no one runs tournaments on Fridays, and they'd be catered more towards people that aren't hyper-competitive. So to give you an idea, I'm going to make a poll, and I'll put it in the description of the video. And in that poll, there's going to be a couple formats you can choose from. And I don't mean things like Conquest and Single Elimination, although there will be that as well, or like Swiss or things like that. What I mean is the crazy ones. So the 2 ideas I have for the first one is one limited, which some of you may remember from way back in Mana Grind days, which was basically non-legendary and non-epic, and in base set and classic set it worked fairly well. But now we have 3 more sets, so I think that'd actually be a decent amount of extra strategies just with basics, commons and rares, and almost anyone can take part in these and make as many decks as they want. And I think it's a format that needs to be brought back a bit, because the price of playing standard at the moment is quite high. I mean, I'm a standard player, so I have a lot of these cards, but not everyone does. So that's a format I'm thinking about. The other one I'm thinking about is base set. So a tournament where all the expansions are banned. Naxxramas, GVG, and BRM are banned, and you can only use classic cards. So I'll put a poll in the description about that, and if you're interested in taking part in these tournaments in the future, which will probably start next week at some point, then put a vote in there, and I'll take it into consideration when I do the tournament announcement on what format it will be running. But anyway, on to the actual video. At number 5, we have Major... Sorry, I need to try and take this seriously. Majordomo Executus. Yes, he got hype, and no, I don't get why. But, yeah, so if you go back to the set review, I made fun of this card a lot, so did Dapper, and we were right, the card is terrible. However, when it came out, we were expecting everyone to try it once just to get the Ragnaros because it looks hilarious. I know I did. But what actually happened was astonishing. You had for about 3 or 4 days people trying to legitimately get Majordomo to work in Constructed. Like, not as a joke. Legitimately trying to use it as a win condition in Freeze Mage and Priest. I saw someone ramping it out with Druid and trying to make the point of it being a legitimate card that works. And I was absolutely baffled by this. I mean, I think that you'll notice a trend in this list actually, that most of the cards on this list do something new, so it's hard to evaluate. And Majordomo Executus does something fairly new. I mean, the only effect that we have similar to this is Jiraxxus, and he's a battle cry, and he has more health, and he's still costs 9 mana, but it's not a 2-stage thing. You just play him and you get Jiraxxus. So it's very hard to evaluate. So for a lot of people, just the fact that he's got the cool factor behind him, I mean, you get to play as Ragnaros basically, was enough. But in reality it's not. And I was honestly baffled that this got any hype whatsoever, but it didn't get that much, which is why it is at number 5. I mean, I'd say I'm stretching a little bit for cards of this list. Dragon Consort. Now, this is up at number 4. Now, Dragon Consort itself has lived up to the hype as a card. The card is very powerful, and I think we'll see some play in non-dragon decks at some point, like Blackwing Corruptor. Blackwing Corruptor has been seeing play in just control warriors running big dragons. And Dragon Consort, I think, will be played in paladins running a more controlling shell just with the bigger dragons that they're using, like Ysera, maybe an Afarian that's been tested a lot and actually been pretty decent, and even Chromagus, things like that. So that's where he'll probably see play in the future. Now the reason he's on this list is because the dragon deck for Paladin just isn't good. I have tried it, it's okay. It's a tier 2 deck at best, I think. I mean, it's a tier 2 deck. I don't think it'll be tier 1 ever. So it's a tier 2 deck, and when it comes to playing Hearthstone on ladder, that's not good enough. You really need to be playing tier 1 decks a lot of the time. Or play a tier 2 deck that's good against the tier 1 decks. So the deck just isn't very good, and Dragon Consort was supposed to make this really powerful Paladin Dragons deck, and it just didn't. So that's why it lands on here. The card itself is very powerful, and I think is one of the better cards in the set, but it just did not have the impact on the class that everyone was expecting it to. Anyway, on to number 3. Similar situation with this one. Fireguard Destroyer. Just my webcam a bit. Fireguard Destroyer. Now, Fireguard Destroyer is, similarly to Dragon Consort, an incredibly powerful card. It is almost a benchmark in 4-drops. And by benchmark, I mean it jumps over it. The card is absurdly strong. But it did absolutely nothing to Shaman. It just didn't. It did not pull Shaman out of the ditch. In fact, Shaman, I think, is the worst class in the game right now. No one plays it. They got Fireguard Destroyer, which is probably the best 4-drop in the game, and it just didn't affect anything. Shaman just is nowhere to be seen right now. So, again, Fireguard Destroyer, very powerful card. It lived up to the whole hype around it, saying, oh my god, one of the best cards in the set, very powerful, it has absurd stats. For a 4-drop, yeah, it does, but apparently that's just not what Shaman needed. I mean, honestly, I think Shaman needs some draw power that isn't terrible. I mean, the fact that every list is playing Mana Tide Totem should show how bad that draw power is, because Mana Tide Totem's not a good card. It just isn't, but you have to play it. So, Fireguard Destroyer is on the list because it just didn't do what people were expecting it to be. They expected it to be the Dark Cultist of Shaman. So, I mean, Dark Cultist basically pulled Priest out of a ditch on its own after Naxxramas. But in reality, it just wasn't. It was just not as good as it was supposed to be. It was kind of like Vojin, where Vojin is very powerful when you play with him, but he just doesn't impact Priest as much as he should. And Fireguard Destroyer fits in that category as well. Now, the last two are actual ones that were overhyped in the normal manner of things. Resurrect. Now, Resurrect is a weird card. Now, remember when I said earlier that people have issues judging cards with new mechanics? I did not judge this card. Actually, did I? No, I think in the set review, me and Dapper were just confused. Like, we did not know how to evaluate this. Same thing happened with the Unstable Portal and Web Spinner. You just can't figure out which side of the line they fall on, because in theory, Resurrect is very powerful, and it's a graveyard interaction, things we don't normally have. So how do you evaluate that? The question is, what does it do for you? The answer is usually a lot. The reason it's not very good, however, is because of the class it's in. Priest has way too many situational spells, and as a result, Resurrect just makes the integrity of the deck worse. So Resurrect itself is very powerful. You get your Injured Blade Master at full HP for 2 mana when they kill it the first time, or Dark Cultist for 2 mana. That's very powerful. The problem is that because you're playing Resurrect, you have less chance of actually drawing the minions required to Resurrect. This is a common problem with Priests. They have too many situational spells that just don't work with each other. A lot of their cards are very powerful. I mean, look at base set Priest. It's a very badly designed base set Priest, by the way. I just want to point that out. They've been getting better at designing Priest cards more recently. Light Bomb was a success. I'm going to say that. But base set priest is very badly designed. You go on base set priest and you're like, oh, this class is amazing, and then you play base set priest and it's just not good. Why is it not good? Because everything's way too situational. It just doesn't. There's no cohesion at all in priest. And Naxxramas added Dark Cultist, which was a runaway success for priest. Very, very stable, non-situational, powerful 3-drop, way ahead of the 3-drop curve back then. Still is. And this was, I mean, Naxxramas, for better or for worse, had way too many very good cards in it. But Dark Cultist stabilized the class. Then you get into GVG, and they get a bit more situational again, but they're also very powerful cards. And then Resurrect just isn't powerful. I mean, the card for Priest that is seeing more play is Twilight Whelp, and the reason for it is because you can run Dragon Synergies, and you get a 1-mana 2/3 most of the time. So it's like Zombie Chow basically, and that's a good card when it goes off. So Resurrect is just too situational, and I think that's a common theme right now. If it's situational for a Priest deck, it's usually bad. That's something just to look at from now, because they already have way too many situational spells, and Resurrect fits in that. Hard to evaluate, but it turned out not to be very good. Was tested though. And the number one overhyped card on this list, and I think about 90% of you saw this coming, by process of elimination, Lava Shock. Now Lava Shock did absolutely nothing. In fact, it is a one-of in the very few Shaman list hanging around right now. And it's okay. It's fine. It's good with spell power. Kills knife jugglers. Doesn't unlock mana crystals very often, weirdly enough, but the card's fine. I would never play 2. Playing 1's okay, but the amount of hype this card got was off the scale. Like, it didn't get Thorazan levels of hype, which lived up to it, by the way. That was like Loatheb, as opposed to what was supposed to be the GVG one. Thorazan is closer to Loatheb than Trogzor. Some of you might get that, where Loatheb got a ton of hype moving in. He was actually a bit underhyped given his impact, and then he lived up to it, and succeeded it actually. Thorazan lived up to his hype, and then Trogzor got kicked by Dr. Boom. But Lava Shock, besides Thorazan, Lava Shock got an absurd amount of hype. Probably second, actually, in the hype train. There were pages and pages and pages and pages of comments talking about the combos and the power and how it's the new innervate for Shaman. And I've already done the maths on this and shown that it isn't. But it's just mediocre. It's okay as a one-off. It's too situational. It's less situational than Resurrect. It's still a burn spell, but it's still situational, and that usually makes the card worse overall. And as a result, just has not lived up to anything. In fact, Shaman got 2 pretty okay or very good cards in the case of Fireguard, but neither of them addressed what the class was bad at. The class is good at 2-for-1s, congratulations, and Lava Shock lets you play more stuff in a turn. But you could already do that. All your stuff costs very, very little. All your overload spells cost little. Like less than normal at least, but things like Hex cost only 3 mana. Lava Shock lets you play more cheap spells faster, but you don't have the card draw to support it. And Fireguard Destroyer is a 2-for-1. Going with the 15 other cards in Shaman that are 2-for-1s. The problem is it didn't actually address any of the problems with the class, which is its card draw. So as a result, neither of them really affected the class that much. But anyway, that's pretty much it for my top 5 list of overhyped cards, with a couple of weird things surrounding them. In the case of Dragon Consort and Fireguard Destroyer, and even Major Dormu in a bit. He's on the list mostly as a why did this card get hype period, as opposed to some of the other cards which actually were overhyped and still saw some play. But anyway, so before I sign off, I'm actually thinking of doing a set comparison of Naxxramas and BRM, and sort of comparing what had more impact and what was just the better set in general, and which was the better experience in terms of adventure. So if you're interested in seeing that kind of video, then I'll churn it out in the next couple of days. So yeah, put that in the comments, and I'll also put the poll in the description for the tournaments I'm thinking of setting up. But anyway, thank you all for watching. If you like the content, please subscribe. If you have any feedback, put it in the comment section below. But for now, this has been Jotto, signing off.